Hello everyone, and welcome to Hutch's Garage for episode 32 of my 1954 Farmall Super MTA tractor restoration. In the previous episode, I removed the clutch housing from the transmission to get to the secondary independent power takeoff drive gear. The secondary drive gear was damaged because the bolt that held it onto the drive shaft, the independent power takeoff drive shaft, had come out and allowed it to wobble around and wear out. In this video, I will attempt to remove that secondary drive gear and shaft and then replace it with a newer one that I received from eBay that I ordered right after I found out I had this problem. If you want to know more about what the cause was or what I found, look to episode 14 and it'll talk about the failure that I found while taking it apart. After I replace the secondary independent power takeoff drive gear and shaft, I will then replace the main transmission pilot bearing, and there's a reason that I had to do that, and you'll find out in the video. Then after that, I will connect the clutch housing back to the transmission. If you like this sort of content, please like and subscribe to my channel, Hutch's Garage. Thank you very much. As you can see, I've got the clutch housing down on the floor, turned on its right side to access the secondary independent power takeoff gear and shaft. That's what I need to remove because the gear is worn on the shaft. The shaft's probably worn too. So that's all got to come out, and that's why I had to remove this entire assembly. So to remove the shaft, let's look in here. There is a circlip that holds the bearing in here. I think you can see that. That circlip needs to come out, and then you can drive the shaft backwards and out. The bearing should come out with it. I'll do that or remove the circlip off camera. Here's the seasonal disconnect coupling right there. Let's move over here. Let's get out of the light. A little more light over here. Okay, that's the gear that needs to come out along with the shaft. And inside there is the location where the 2-inch pipe cap is at. That 2-inch pipe cap is right down in there. I took it out already. On a normal tractor, to take all this out, you remove the nut, or not the nut, the bolt and the washer that holds the gear onto that shaft. Put 2 pieces of wood behind the gear and drive the shaft out the back with a large brass drift. So that's the direction it's going to be going. It's going to be going out the back like this. So I'll be taking that, like I said, the circlip off in the back, and we'll see if things start to move. So I was able to get the shaft and the gear out. After I got the circlip out, and I'll talk about that, I used a big drift like this, and a hammer, and reached through this hole right down here. So this is the shaft and the gear, and you can see I can wiggle that gear around a lot. And the shaft is worn some. The bearings appears to be good. I'll have to take off the seasonal disconnect coupling right here. It's just a roll pin. I'll just drive it out from this end here and then put it on the newer shaft that I got. So here's the replacement shaft that I got. I can't wiggle hardly at all. And the bearing seems about as good as what the original one is. So there's where the seasonal disconnect goes. Of course, here's the bad bolt and the washer that I found wedged up in that area. This is what the good bolt is supposed to look like. It's a fine thread with the international dot on it. I'm probably going to use some Loctite blue or something like that to hold it on. So how I got this circlip out, basically what I did, you need 2 screwdrivers. You need at least one good sharp one. I used this one to get under this angled edge, pulled it out, then stuffed this, got enough room that I could stick this next screwdriver in, and I kept working it back and forth until I worked most of the way around. And finally, when I got about halfway, it popped out. So be careful when you do that. Be ready when it pops. So that's how you get it out. I believe getting it in will be a lot easier than it was taking it out. So that's where I am right now. I'll be putting this shaft in after I take the seasonal disconnect coupling off and transferring it to the newer shaft, or the better shaft, I'll put it that way. Alright, I've transferred the seasonal disconnect coupling onto the better shaft. The sleeve came out on the needle bearings. There's needle bearings up in here. They appeared to be very good shape. The sleeve, the inner sleeve for the bearings, I took it out and put on the shaft. And then you have to really, it's hard to do. I don't think I could have done this on camera. You have to wiggle the shaft in here, and I used a board under here to hold this gear up, to work it up, get that spline coming through about that far, attach the gear a little bit, and then lift and shove the shaft into the needle bearings, and that allows the rear bearing to just go in just a little bit. I went ahead and put the bolt and washer in the front on the gear to keep it from popping loose, and I use a drift pin and a hammer to start pounding it in. There it goes. There, it's home. So it's all the way in there. And I will take that nut off, and you can see the spline a little bit sticking out. So the gear needs to go back just a little bit. And I'll put some Loctite, I believe blue is the best to use on this, on the threads of that bolt for the gear. And we'll put this circlip in. Basically I'll work one end in and get it on that way. So that's the replaced shaft for the independent power takeoff drive. With the clutch housing and torque amplifier housing off the tractor and down on the floor, if you need to replace the torque amplifier unit, now's the time to do it. To begin replacing the torque amplifier unit, you would bend back this locking tab on this large nut that goes around right here. Once you release that, you may need a spanner wrench to get this nut off. You take that off, and then this front part of the carrier will come out. You lift it out. Then you would move to the back. Back here, there's 4 nuts around here. And at that point, once you remove those 4, or bolts, I should say, remove those 4 bolts, the whole unit should come out. And then you can access whatever you need to do to it there. This is the main transmission drive gear again, and a roller bearing fits inside this. And again, I said this before, this is the gear that drives the belt pulley drive. I want to show you something else on this. Right here is an oil hole that comes from the transmission area. There's a cavity of just about the same size. It allows oil to come in here and fill up the torque amplifier, carrier, and planetary gears. So that's where it gets its oil. And it would fill get this over here where I can show you. It would fill the cavity in here. Now when I put this tractor back together, I'm going to fill this before I close everything up, so it will have oil immediately when it starts up and begins running. So this is the cavity where the oil for the torque amplifier is at. Right now we're looking at the front end of the transmission at the constant mesh gear here on the lower part of the transmission. This is the pilot bearing, the roller pilot bearing that sits inside the main drive gear that drives all this. The main drive gear meshes with this, and the drive gear goes on over like that. And this would be fifth gear notches here that you see. That gear would come forward, and to go into fourth gear it would go to the back. This opening right here is where the main drive gear goes through, which is attached to the torque amplifier assembly. It's all part of it, the same thing. To oil the torque amplifier, there is a cavity right here and a matching cavity in the bearing carrier for the drive gear with the torque amplifier assembly. And this right here is I guess a trough that fills with oil. As these gears are spinning, it throws oil up into this area at the top, up here, and then fills this trough, and then oil comes out here and oils the rear bearing on the torque amplifier there, where this main drive gear goes through. So when the engine's running, this gear is turning this way with the clutch out, and it's in constant mesh with this gear, and this gear goes this direction. All right. So I'm planning to replace the pilot roller bearing here with a new one. And to do that, I have to take off these locking tabs and take these bolts out right here, and then there's a large washer where these two bolts go through that hold that bearing on. Okay, so that's what I plan to do. Now when I mate the clutch housing with this front of the transmission, I've already cleaned this surface area so it's ready to accept a gasket, and then I'll have the gasket all ready to go as I install it. We have to be very careful when moving this assembly in here. We got to be able to catch this bearing into that drive gear, and I may come up with a way to pull this up to wiggle it around. It will move a little bit, but not a whole lot, to line it up. It's very critical that we line it up and not put too much pressure in that direction while we put it back together. So like I said, I'm going to remove and replace that roller bearing right there, and it's a simple task. To prevent losing stuff down there, I'm going to put a cardboard thing underneath it to make sure if anything drops, it'll come to the outside. I've got the new bearing on. I had to use a brass drift and the hammer to tap it on. It was a real tight fit, not terribly tight. So I'm ready to put these the big retaining washer. I've got a new fold over tab made, and let's put these bolts on. Alright, that should be tight enough. I pre-bent the tabs on this fold over lock and to help, get it started. So what I'll do is take a punch like this. Let's drive this one down. I can get to that. I may have to rotate everything. And fold it over like that. So I'll repeat that in these other 3 places. So there, now we have the new bearing on there. Hold on, I must come clean. I damaged the main pilot bearing to the transmission by using an engine hoist that the cylinder kept drifting down, and it would not align properly. I drew up the bolts from the clutch housing to the transmission, and I heard one of the rollers pop and drop into the transmission. Here you can see one of the rollers that is missing from the pilot bearing. In the next video, I show the proper way of installing the clutch housing to the transmission. This is the reason I had to replace the bearing as shown previously in this video. Getting ready to connect the clutch housing to the main transmission. You can see the new bearing that I put in here. I'm going to coat this with engine assembly lube and also the inside of the gear where the outer race is. This is very critical. Unlike an M, an H, or a Super M, this connection is much different than those 2 tractors. It's more critical on this one because you have to line it up and get this bearing to go inside. So what I've done, I've got a way of lifting up this shaft just slightly to move it around if I have to guide it in. And when I put it in, we just want no extra pressure. In other words, do not put bolts in and force it into that bearing. It's got to go in on its own. And I'm going to rotate the shaft coming from the torque amplifier where the gear comes into here, rotate that, and this will rotate some as I move the tractor forward. I've decided to use my chain fall instead of a hydraulic lift. The reason being, my chain fall is sure-proof. When I raise it to a certain spot, it will stay there and not drift down. This has, like I said, it has to be lined up perfectly. So what I've done, and it was this way when I removed the engine, I make sure that this is pretty much level here, which means in this direction it's pretty level. Okay, let's get it down here on the regular surface. There it is. On this surface here, it throws it off. Then also, I've leveled it up, the clutch housing, as I bring it in. So I'm going to use 2 guide bolts in the upper area, and I'll put them in when I get close enough to put them in. Alright, I've got 2 guide bolts on the top 2 holes. I'm wheeling the tractor into the transmission. I'm trying to level it up. Watch the gap here around these bolts, and we'll slowly guide it in. I'm going to do this off camera for the most part because this will take some time. But as I get it near the bearing, I will spin the main gear here with the clutch right there. And if I have to wiggle up on the bearing, I'll do that too as I do that. So I'm going to just slowly creep it forward and match this up. So at this point, I've got the main carrier in the hole, and I lined up the bearing, and I did have to lift up the bearing using this wire and screwdriver to get it up and pull in, and I've now got the bearing spinning freely, and it went in the hole, and I lifted up probably maybe a 32nd of an inch, you know, it's hanging on that rear bearing in the back, all that weight. So I'm ready to move everything in. I'm pretty much up there. And the biggest thing I want to do is turn this shaft, make sure it's free. So at this point, I can start installing all of the bolts and slowly snugging it up. So I'll start putting in bolts and snugging it up. So it's successful. We did not damage the bearing, and that's how you got to do it. You got to be very careful. Like I said, I kept these as level as possible. I watched my clearance around these guide bolts. If I could wiggle it, that means I was able to, you know, move it a little bit. That shaft, you know, not only does it go up and down a little bit, it moves side to side. So that's, I think that tool right there, just to lift it up and guide it back and forth as you wiggle this thing in, helped a lot. So all I need to do now is snug it up. As I go, I'll slowly turn this, but really it's very free. That means that bearing's good. We're free and clear. So we'll tighten it up against that gasket. Alright, so I've got it buttoned up. I got one more bolt to put in. And I believe these are grade 5 bolts. And these are 5/8 inch diameter bolts. So the torque spec for a grade 5 is 112 foot-pounds. I'm probably going to go about 95 foot-pounds. I don't want to go over extreme. I'm not 100% sure if these are grade 5, but I'm thinking they are. So everything went well. Everything's free. So that's the way it's supposed to be.
That's all the time we have for in this episode. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Please continue to join me for the next episode as I restore and rebuild this 1954 International Harvester Farmall Super MTA tractor.